really good, but I finished off my doctorate degree from the University of Utah back in 2001. For my doctoral capstone, I completed a research project. Essentially, I wanted to know what it was that OTs and OT assistants were doing across Utah's public schools. And so I was able to find out what occupations they were addressing, and I also was able to figure out what they're not addressing in school-based practice. Then I also explored some of the enablers and barriers to practice to figure out what it is that's keeping OTs from doing what they want to do, or what things are going good for practitioners. So if you're interested in that research, I'm happy to share it with you. I believe that OT plays a really vital role in our schools, and especially in AT, and I'm thankful to be part of my team.
And I have the opportunity to present with Travis. He asked me to do this presentation, and I gladly accepted and whatnot. And so thank you for letting us share our story with you, and I'm hoping that it helps you. My name is Scott Jerome. I'm a physical therapist at Shriners Hospital here in Salt Lake City, and so everybody has access to that. I started my career in 2000 at Shriners Hospital, went away for a while with children with special healthcare needs, so that allowed me to travel throughout the state and identify gross motor, fine motor needs, and then refer usually to you all. And so the different school districts or into the different early interventions. That's where I really became, we did a lot of neonatal follow-up screening, and I really became excited about just normal development and knowing typical development so that we can identify abnormal development and help our kids. I came back to Shriners Hospital in 2016 to their seating and mobility department, and I've learned quite a bit since then. I thought I knew a little bit about wheelchairs. However, I knew very little. And so what I'm hoping to, and where I've really become, where I geek out in, maybe it would be the best way to say, is in on-time mobility. And so that's what I was really hoping to share with you all today. And so Travis allowed me to have this opportunity and allowed us to do a collaboration that has really opened up my eyes as well. Okay. This is our team. Sorry, we're going to go back. I can never say I take anything. This is our fearless leader at the top. That's me in the middle. Our techs, our assistive technology, our ATPs, as well as technicians are down there, and then our office staff who kind of keeps us all moving through. So it's a team effort that goes on through there. And what I want to do is start with is that you're part of that team. Any child that we're seeing or we're collaborating with or working across, you're always welcome into our clinic, okay? So those doors are wide open because we only get one shot at them. And actually, we do follow up. So anyways, but please understand as we go through this, the door is open for you to come in as well, okay? All right. So we'll go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to take a moment and just kind of describe where we're going to go today. I think it's helpful to have a roadmap to keep us first on task and to make sure that we get all of our points across. First off, Scotty's going to talk about the importance of on-time mobility and how this movement has really evolved into the social justice arena lately to talk about mobility as a human right. We're going to then look at the barriers to using power mobility with young children, and there's a lot of them. There's the cost, and you have different values and belief systems from different players that all factor into that. There's trying to access the technology. There's a lot of things there. Then third, Scotty's going to touch on the appropriateness of who and when for power mobility. Then I will jump in and share a framework and an assessment that can help really guide our clinical reasoning so that we're trying to be thoughtful about our interventions. And then we're going to share about how our partnership has really come to be over this last year in helping teach power mobility in the context of special education classrooms. And then finally, we're going to end with that rhetorical question of where do we go from here? Meaning that all the things that we share with you today, you basically have the opportunity to follow what we've done in Weber District and partner with Shriners if you'd like and see where that goes. So, all right, Scotty.
Thank you. Okay, the importance of it. And so this is what I really fell in. When I came back to Shriners, again, mine was really assessment and treat and whatnot in regards to motor skills. And so I thought wheelchairs were very passive in regards to that. And that was my biggest misconception. And so why is it important? All right, go ahead. All right. Let's kind of change our terminology a little bit too, because I think wheelchairs, a lot of it's been insurance driven and funding driven, and sometimes it affects our practice, and it shouldn't, okay? So we need to start changing our terminology a little bit. So instead of early mobility, which is such a misnomer because usually we're late if we're putting a wheelchair in place. Okay, so really we got to work more to on-time mobility. Okay, we need to really, what we want to do is we want to provide opportunities to our children with motor impairments to the same as what we have our typically developing children. Okay, so that's what we're driving to. So let's go with on-time mobility, because usually we're late or they're not seeking out our services of mobility, right? I stopped using driving. And this was actually the first meeting that I had with Travis and his team, is I was saying driving, and that is such a misnomer. It's mobility. If you watch a child walk for the first time, they are not driving, they are moving, and they are moving all over, and it's really radical of how they're going. There's not a whole bunch of pattern to it. So we're being mobility, okay, versus, and let's say moving instead of driving, okay? We need to start using terms more similar to those used with infant mobility of normal development versus wheelchair power use. If you think about wheelchairs, one thing I'm going to say is really in the wheelchair industry, they're doing better, okay? But all pediatric mobility is just small adult mobility. And so we got to watch that. And so we're trying to do better at Shriners there with that. And then Travis is helping us understand it a little bit better versus us just putting out devices, okay? There's a big movement right now, which I totally agree with, as mobility is a right. As I was reading all the literature on mobility, I'll admit my weaknesses is I kind of poo-pooed this, and I was like, yeah, well, of course mobility is a right. But the way that this article put it together, Sabbath 2022, real new. However, this has been around for a while. Yeah, Rights of Persons with Disability in 2006 and in 1990 addressed children's mobility as a right. Okay, and that's the way we need to really look at this. We need to drive this hard, is what I believe. Timing, we have to be on time, okay? We can't wait and put these mobility devices in there because of all the benefits that it provides versus no mobility, okay? There has to be some urgency. And after I read this, and I hope you hear it in my voice sometimes, there is an urgency. We need to push and get these kids moving because all the benefits that they get from that is hopefully what we're able to share. If we even compare to our typically developing, we know exactly all the benefits of it. So we got to do it on time, and we have to be urgent about it. Okay? Multimodal. So in regards to look at this, sometimes it's seen as a passive mobility. It's not. That was my misconception. Why not, if we have every tool available to us, why not use them all? Okay? So this is something that we should be putting into play, in my opinion. And I think the opinion of many. Frequency in the real world environment. So self-initiated movement is critical in motivating natural environments. So if you're not moving, you're not understanding your environments, and we need to have that opportunity on a daily basis. Okay, so if you're only doing it every once in a while, you're not understanding the benefits of it. And finally, sociability. And so again, these kids need to be involved. We got to avoid learned helplessness is basically what we're looking at here, okay? They need to participate. Participate is going to be another big word that I use often, okay? So what does the research say in regards to on-time mobility, okay? There's a lot of research out there, and we can read through the increased participation, positive impact in development, increased participation. This was great. Increased eating, weight gain, and better sleep patterns. I think that's just less stress. Positive emotional, perceptual, intellectual curiosity, assertiveness, confidence, motivation, better understanding of cause and effect, positive outcomes of upper extremity use, age-appropriate behaviors, age-appropriate attention span. We're starting to see all these, and I enjoy working with our speech therapists and starting to understand more and more what you do, because what we do cross over a lot. And so none of this should be surprising. Okay, so I'm like, yeah, okay. Go ahead next, please. However, here's what our research is. It's really qualitative. Okay, so we have case studies. We have some things that aren't real well. We don't have great quantitative data. Okay, only one randomized controlled, 3 subject multi-designed, and then most are quality, suggests association that the outcome is good. So sometimes when you have more qualitative type literature, maybe sometimes that quantitative is a little bit stronger in regards to moving the movement forward, if that makes sense, for our payers to pay for this type of thing. we have a lot of qualitative things. So maybe as a group, we need to start looking at, we need to put these into our environments that kids are actually functioning and saying what's happening quantitative. No worries. Oh, I can talk. And so let's start putting these into advice, and let's start putting them into their daily routines, and then let's start writing down what's happening. Okay, let's measure them too. And hopefully we'll give you some ideas how to start, and we're going to support you on it too. Okay. The big thing with Travis, I'm deviating a little bit. Travis said, "What are you doing up there?" I said, "Oh, you want to know? Come on in." And then he's like, "Can we have one of those?" I'm like, "All we can do is ask." And so this is how this partnership started. And then Travis says, "Hey, this is what's going on in our school, and this is what it does." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And now we're starting to quantify it, and we're going to give you some of those tools. So being in the state of Utah, you have access to our Shriners, okay? So just know that. So we can support you on this. Let's go ahead next. So we said it's descriptive more than experimental. However, why don't we go to on-time mobility in regards to our typically developing children? Okay, we got to know typical so that we can decide, so we can determine or we can identify what's abnormal, right? Okay, so Karen Adolph, 2008. When kids start creeping's like hands and knees crawling's like army crawling, how I identify it here. She did this study where kids would be creeping and they'd have a drop off. New crawlers, new creepers would just fly right off. No experience, they just fly right off. As they became better and they had more experience of things, they knew how they stopped, first of all, at that incline. They started making decisions on how to get down it with a better motor response, and they were decision making. Okay, so we see improvements in motor, but you're starting to make decisions, okay? So that's a big deal. Walking. So let's go again. Karen Adolph again. Walking and the number of steps taken. So first of all, you have decision making at 9, 10, 11 month, okay? And then you start walking. And you don't just stand up and start walking, okay? And I'm going to make a point with this. This was 6 hours, 14,000 steps, 100 falls, and a distance of 46 football fields. So that child has an opportunity to practice. That's only in 6 hours. So then let's do that how many times a week, how many times a month. This child has the opportunity to practice what they're doing. So we need to have the ability to practice what we're doing. And that would be the same thing with mobility. If you have a mobility impairment, we would say our power wheelchair, okay? And then here's the next thing, and I've been working a lot with our speech therapist in regards to teaching me how to be able to treat. She's like, shut up, okay? She's like, be quiet. Words are hard to understand for the child, and they just need to be moving. But as we go back, however, when a child starts moving or starts walking, the interactions between their parents and that child is much different. And that vocabulary explodes when this interaction becomes different. So we have that, if typically developing or experiencing this with mobility, well then our kids with mobility impairment can also have those benefits right now. But we have barriers to allow them to have access to these things, okay? So here's what I just said, basically, and I use these all the time. I said, the more trouble your kid gets in, the better I'm doing my job, is being a physical therapist, and then also being a therapist that introduces them to mobility, okay? Kids, our kids with mobility impairments or any type of impairments, they need to be participating, whether it be with their own abilities or a piece of equipment. I use tool here. But again, this can be our communication devices, this can be our mobility. We need to start using the tools that are available to us, and hopefully we can make them more accessible to you, okay? All right, we'll go ahead. There's barriers though. I know that y'all have seen barriers, and this is what's been incredibly surprising to me as I've come back to Shriners and started looking more at power mobility and on-time mobility, okay? Cost. So let's just look in general, cost. So there are these devices out there. However, you're not usually getting them funded, okay? It's really expensive to put these pieces of equipment out. I got to give it to Permobil. So our first one is this Mini Explorer right up here, and that's the top one, the yellow seat. So they took on the FDA, and the FDA really said, and they challenged the FDA to address the needs of our younger users. That was very expensive for them. And then if we were to code this, I hear that's another tens of thousands up into hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't understand that completely, but just understand there's not a whole bunch of money to be made here. And so that's why it hasn't driven. We're going to find out that this is not a new idea to get kids early mobility. As we look at these new ones, the Cosmo, there's a $5,000, and usually the $2,700 mostly going to come out of pocket. Okay. Cosmo, 5,000. So that's this one right over here. I'm just kind of going down. Okay. That's the Cosmo, and we actually worked with them a little bit, and I don't know why this didn't fly, because that's the same base that we do use that we're going to demonstrate today, and they put their own seating on it. I think that they marketed to, this is my opinion, I think they marketed to us as physical therapists, occupational therapists in general, and I don't know if, and we don't have that many opportunities to do early mobility evals, is what I'm seeing. However, maybe they should have marketed it to parents, because parents should be driving it, but that was one that we were able to submit to insurance for. However, it went away for whatever reason. I think, again, the cost of it, again, cost benefit. I don't think they were making a whole bunch of money on it, so it went away real fast. Here's finally Cosmo. You have a WYSIBUG and a Bugsy, these two bottom ones. So these tools are out there. I wanted to buy some of those for Shriners to try them. They're like, no way. You can come and pick them up at the border, up at in the Canadian border, because they're like, we do not want to go in the United States and deal with the FDA. So these tools are not available to us. So even though, and they're not cheap either. So they're coming out of pocket, okay? I probably should have taken this out, but since it's in there, why would you sell a $6,000 wheelchair if the next wheelchair is more like $15,000 to $20,000? So cost is obviously a problem. That's a barrier, okay? Go ahead. Funding. So again, we work a lot with the funding agencies here. You get one wheelchair every 5 years, okay? So you better make a good decision. That's another thing. That's a benefit I have. We have the benefit of time, and we do have a lot of donations for things that we can pull off. So if we just a little, but you get one shot, and so that's a little bit of a deterrent. I don't want to make a mistake there. Even getting to do it 4 times a day, however many times a week, I still get a little worried. It's hard to predict the future, right? Not allowed access to power mobility until you're able to demonstrate your ability to drive. Well, yes, sir. Yes, you can. So if there's growth or change. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So if you do submit for one, if you get one wheelchair every 5 years, and I'm going to change your questions. You can accommodate for growth, or if there's change, you can accommodate that seating. Yes, that's true. So we can get growth kits, and we can get, and if a child changes, let's say, usually it's a progression of their disease process if they need more of a chair later, or if, yes. It is another letter of medical necessity, but yes, that's true. It is true. You need to demonstrate driving. So let's go back to that walking idea. If those walkers get all that practice and that many times in 6 hours, our kids, if you don't get a chance to practice, they're going to learn how to drive much later. If you don't get to practice, and you get to drive much later. Even I have a 15-year-old, even the kids that are going to put a car on the road, they get 1 year at least. They get the license anyways. That should be scary enough. Not allow access to, we've had this before. Gary and I, we worked together for a long time. He's an ATP, worked with Norco for years. They used to say that you shouldn't even be looking at a wheelchair until you're 2 to 3 years out. I don't know if that's been in policy, but we have had to appeal that at times, more in the past, not so much now. So again, we're already late. Onset of walking, even now that they've changed the developmental milestones a little bit, with 75% you need to hit that ability, it's still like 15 months. So we can hold on to 15 months. So we're already late, just in regards to even maybe a manual wheelchair. Okay, so we're late. Here's another one. Here's some parents' perception. So if I'm your physical therapist and everybody says, hey, when's my child going to walk? And I go, hey, you want to talk about a wheelchair? They're like, oh, you're bailing on me. Okay, sorry, I already jumped all the way down to here. They have a perception that I want to work on this when this is what they want to work on. Okay, that's sometimes a hard sell. Okay, but again, let's look multimodal. These are expensive. I think we've identified that. And then if you go with a bigger wheelchair, a lot of the ones that are available, you buy your $20,000, $30,000 power wheelchair, and then you go get your $80,000 van. I'm just making a point, but it's not, that's a hard one to do. That's a barrier. Us therapists, we're a barrier. Okay. So we need to take some steps. I've heard this a lot of times when I've said, hey, can we start to try to put something in there? Okay. Again, if I'm the one making the decision on a manual wheelchair or a power wheelchair, and I have 5 years to make this right, and I don't know if the child can drive, and I don't know how successful that's going to be, that's a hard one. I think I'm going to go more on the slam dunk for the manual wheelchair. Okay, and we do oftentimes. But again, at Shriners, we can spread the resources. But that's usually what's going to happen. And I think I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, of how I would do that if I worked outside of Shriners. Okay, but that's a good discussion, and we can always have it in the clinic with the child that you're seeing. Okay. Perception of decreased participation in walking or other forms. So if we put a power wheelchair in place, then that child I'm treating is going to stop participating in crawling, creeping, walking, running. I don't think that's true. I think we're going to say, we have to say, are kids lazy? They're not. I will argue that just because you have low tone and it takes a lot more energy to do something, they're smart. They know it takes a lot more energy to do something. They might need some assistance with that. Will they participate less in motor participation or acquisition of developmental milestones? I think if we can show them the benefits of mobility, and we're showing that in the literature, it's qualitative, but if we show them the benefits of mobility, maybe we'll acquire more of those, maybe we'll acquire more time participating in those gross motor skills that they have difficulties with, because now they understand the benefits of power mobility. Power mobility and some of our communication devices, they do kind of cross over a little bit. We don't want them ending up in the closet. If kids find an easier way to do things, I can speak to mobility, they will push that wheelchair aside because it's a lot easier to get somewhere walking than trying to drive that wheelchair. They're going to get somewhere, they're not going to use it in the house. They're going to use it outside maybe, but they're going to abandon that piece of equipment if they can do it easier. I work a lot with our speech therapist. She says, if they can communicate quicker and get their needs met, they will push that device aside. And I'm like, we do a lot of the same things. And so we don't want to fail and put that off to the side. Kids will tell you what they want to do the most efficient way they can. I don't think they're lazy. Can you discharge from a wheelchair? You bet. If you start walking, I don't want you driving in the wheelchair. So you can discharge it, maybe use it a different way, longer distances, energy conservation, etc. Again, this is why not use multiple modalities to promote self-initiated mobility? That's our goal. If we have a tool out there, why not use it? Okay. Appropriateness. Okay. Who should be using this? We're trying to figure that out. Yes, go ahead. If I have a so if I have a child that is using a wheelchair, are they decreasing their building of the muscles and the motor control of them participating in either creeping or crawling or walking? Yes, we could say that, but hopefully I would encourage them to participate in it more on their own time. Again, it's very similar to the speech, the communication devices. If they are motivated to do it, they will participate in it more. If I like the topic, if I can promote mobility and they understand the benefits, I'm hoping that they participate in creeping, crawling, rolling, walking more often. But yeah, you only have so many hours in a day. It's true. But I think they're going to go to the path of least resistance. And you get many more places walking than you do in a wheelchair that in regards to accessibility. And even children, they know what level they want to play at. Okay. So yeah, it's a good discussion. Who's appropriate for this? So we're starting to figure this. I've started to push. I do a little bit of research. I'm a clinician first, but we've been doing a little bit of research here at Shriners, and we're starting to say. So I'm saying, what kids should be doing this? Okay, And if we look at this, we've demonstrated, and the literature shows that 2 years old, you're able to move. You're able to be mobile. You're actually able to drive. Self-initiated mobility with intention. Okay. Ken retired. Ken Kazol was a OT. That was great. He'd been in the industry for years. He dropped all of his old literature on my desk. 1985. This has been in 1986. This has been observed. All the older literature is better than what we have now, in my opinion. And so this is not a new thing. That's what kind of killed me, because we need to have access to this, and this is what we're hoping to drive. But this is not new. 2-year-olds can go. Well, I wanted to see if we can go younger. So we did a quick. I'm just going to touch on this real quick. We did a study. This is our baby bug. Maybe go ahead and tap on the video. Just tap on, with the cursor. So this is a baby bug that we were able to develop at Shriners and try it. And so it's just a little power wheelchair. So we're like, hey, when can kids be mobile? What is the best age to start putting a joystick in front of them and seeing if they're mobile? Okay. So we did, and you got to start typical, is my belief. So we took 20 kids, ages 5 months to 15 months. And then we said, okay, let's go interact and let's just get some video of them. None of them had mobility impairment, so he cleared that with the Peabody. Okay. And what we started to see is that as you demonstrate cause and effect more at 9 to 10 months, let me go back and say what we measured. We just observed them. We said, how many times do they look at the joystick? How many times do they touch the joystick? Does the parent go hand over hand? Does the parent just drive it, et cetera? And we started to see that more, if you want a start of a guideline, and can we all agree that when we say an age, we're talking more developmentally? Okay, so whenever I use an age, so I'm saying developmentally. So we can have 5-year-olds that are actually at a two-year. Okay, so what we're starting to see is that if you're developmentally 1 year, 15 months of age, you start interacting with that joystick much more. You start taking repetitions, and you start to understand that there's cause and effect. You understand that you're moving, and you're understanding that tool moves you. Okay? You're not doing real great about intentional driving from one place to another, intentional moving. But again, kids that start walking are pretty random in the way that they move. So about 12 months, 15 months, yes. I failed a little bit. This is one of my failures because he's like 6 to 7 months. And so he didn't do a whole bunch, but he is moving, and it used to look really, I could talk about this a lot. It didn't look great, but they're getting benefit from it. And so when they transition to the next step, is what we're presenting today, they do great. So especially at 2 months. So I don't know what's going on here. I got to figure this out a little bit more. I think I know less, and we have to have proper expectation of the tool. So with this little guy, I was like, hey, drive to me. And if they didn't drive to me, drive is what I was saying, then it was failure. No, there's still a lot going on, and I got to find out what's going on now. So hopefully we're going to kind of help, you all are going to help us figure that out, okay? And that's the reason for this discussion today. Yes, we can, but it takes us a while, and we're trying to figure out a way to meet with you all that somebody else can learn how to build them. And we really want the state of Utah to have access, and that's why we're here today. Okay. 12 months, 15. So we've took our measure. We said success is if you're looking or interacting with the joystick 50% of the time on each of those different measures of what we were looking at. That was success, and that was starting to happen at 12 months of age. Okay, so 12 months, we're like, oh wow, kids really start to move and start pulling to stand and cruising and doing all those things at about 12 months, and they're walking at 50. We would love to crush that gap of mobility impairment, and then you put a tool in, and then we're having the same opportunities as our typically developing kids. Okay. Finally, one last thing on this part of my part is that we really want to go to that joystick, because the joystick we can do for cheap, simple, lower electronics. I said cheaper. It seems like money drives a lot of things. However, what we want to do is if we go to a head array, it really complicates the idea. So if we can really look at making that joystick successful, and we do a lot of ways of mounting and those types of things, we want to go there first, because the next thing opens up some more barriers, if you want to say. Okay. Who else? Who else can do it? Increase energy expenditure. Again, I probably should have rode my bike here today. That would have been the right thing to do. Would have been healthy. I I would have been doing better maybe for the environment. But you know what? For how long it would have taken me to recover to do that, I don't think I would have been very beneficial to you. So maybe we should consider energy conservation. Even though you're exercising, I don't believe you need to exercise all day. And we definitely have studies out there that kids with cerebral palsy have increased energy expenditure, spina bifida, other conditions, any impairment. But again, we're looking for that 2-year-old developmentally cognition. If they can, I think they have the right to participate in mobility. And maybe we should find a way to do it. And there's many different ways to participate in it, not just a power wheelchair, right? If we truly feel mobility is a right, what about considering that these children that need increased time of exposure to learn how to use the various mobility tools? So our 2-year-olds take off. But is there benefit in kids that are with lower cognition to participate in self-initiated mobility? Yeah, it's really cool. It's a huge motivator. Speech therapists. If we can use this joystick as a tool, maybe we can even turn that over into using other devices. So if we have a switch that is used like a joystick or anything else like that, or you learn that cause and effect, or you learn the benefits of that, that might carry over into some of the other tools that are available. Movement is a huge motivator, and it happens real fast. When you move, and all of a sudden it goes. So maybe even our kids with lower cognition, they might be it might be something that really motivates them, and maybe it's the learner driven that motivates them. All right. Clinically, I've put a lot of kids in wheelchairs that I probably didn't think that they were going to be expected to drive, and after an amount of exposure, they're driving. And they're driving, and driving, I use not appropriate now. They use it intent. So it's neat. So otherwise I would have missed them probably before my exposure to this. Okay. All right. Here's the head array. Sorry, I kind of jumped around. All right. So go to the joystick first. Head array is going to make things much more difficult. However, if that's what's needed, everything's a cost benefit. I'm not just talking money. If you are able to participate in self-initiated mobility and it does take head array, then let's do it. And we can help you with that too. Okay. Next. There we go. Okay, I'm going to pass this off to Travis.
Sorry about the slides, everybody. I'm a rookie at this. Okay, so we're going to jump into the framework here and talk about basically to help us understand how we can use our clinical reasoning to make the decisions that we're going to make as we use power mobility. Go ahead. Okay, so many of you guys probably recognize this textbook. This is Assistive Technologies, Principles and Practices. You probably used it in your graduate coursework or your undergraduate coursework. It's 5th edition now, just came out in 2020. It was a good COVID refresher to be able to do the AT. So in preparation for today's presentation, I went through and looked at the chapters on power mobility, hoping to be able to find some guidance and direction to help me to be able to figure out how do I start this instruction for young kids with power mobility. And the textbook was an absolute flop. There was nothing really helpful whatsoever in there to help me figure out how to help a young child with power mobility. I went through and I looked at the different assessments that are listed in the textbook. There were 7 of them, and they were kind of helpful, I guess, if you're looking at helping adults or if you're looking at measuring how a wheelchair can change participation in life. If you want to be able to figure out people's perceptions of what they think about power mobility, that's great. So I went back to the literature and found some better information. But really, yeah, nothing in the textbook to help me figure out how to help a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old learn power mobility, or to be able to help individuals who are functioning at that cognitive level of a 2 or 3-year-old with commensurate cognitive abilities. Fortunately, I did come across Elizabeth Nilsson. She's an OT clinician with 40 years of experience. She, after she became an OT, she went back to school and got her bachelor's degree, and then 10 years later went back and got a master's degree. 10 years later, got her research PhD. She is very interested in learning to be able to help others. She's from Sweden. So she devoted her life to being able to teach individuals with cognitive disabilities power mobility use. She created a framework that is called the Driving to Learn framework. it's not the learning to drive framework, it's the driving to learn framework. It's a very important piece of her reasoning here. And it's not a translation error going from the Swedish language to the English language. And I'll describe that more here in a moment. The learning to drive framework, it came out of her PhD work where she went through and she researched the natural progression for individuals to be able to use power mobility. Just like the physical therapy research describes the mobility sequences for walking, Elizabeth Nilsson went through and figured out what's this natural progression for power mobility. And she went through and basically followed individuals from age 12 months, or basically 1 year, right, all the way through age 86. And she was able to document the natural progression. Okay, next slide. Okay, so there's some specific pieces with this driving to learn framework, some assumptions. The first one is that it is a top-down approach to therapy or to learning, and it's not a bottom-up approach. And so what do I mean by this? So a bottom-up approach is where we go through and we build underlying skills in individuals. And we assume that as they go through and develop their motor skills, their cognitive skills, language and behavior skills, that they will spontaneously generalize all these skills to be able to perform a task. In contrast, a top-down approach assumes that as an individual engages in an activity, that they are going to influence their neurobiology, right? They're going to go through and build those underlying skills that we know that they need to be able to perform an activity well. The second principle is that the driving to learn framework, it's for children, but it's also for adolescents or adults with profound to mild degrees of cognitive disabilities. So those lower functioning individuals. The third assumption is that practitioners are really teaching how to use tools. In this case, it's a joystick. And the fourth assumption is that the user is simultaneously developing skills in many areas. So as they're driving the power mobility, they are going to simultaneously develop some motor skills. That was a good question from earlier. They're going to learn language. They're going to learn cause and effect. They're going to learn behavior, all these other skills that go right along with it. And lastly, the assumption is that power mobility, it follows a natural sequence. It's predictable, and we can measure it. Okay, so here is the framework in the broadest sense. There are 8 different phases to this, and the phases reflect the user's ability to perform. So these phases include novice, curious novice, beginner, advanced beginner, sophisticated beginner, competent, proficient, and expert. After Elizabeth Nilsson went through and developed her framework, she was able to partner with another OT researcher. She came across Josephine Durkin. She's an OT from the UK, and she spent her time also researching power mobility interventions and outcomes. These two, they joined forces and they collaborated on developing an assessment tool called, that goes along with the driving to learn framework. It's called the Assessment of Learning Power Mobility Use. And you can find this assessment on Elizabeth Nilsson's website that I shared earlier. It's currently in its second version, and it's really easy to find on the internet, even if you don't go to her website. This is a picture of the first page of the assessment. There are 3 pages altogether in the assessment. And as you can see, it is a criterion referenced assessment. And basically, it identifies 5 different factors that are really instrumental in helping kids to be able to use power mobility. So these 5 factors include attention, activity and movement, understanding of the tool use, expressions and emotions, and interaction and communication. I'll be honest with you, it's not a perfect assessment right now. Like many assessments, it takes time for the research to be able to validate and to show that it's useful. But the research is going on right now. They just recently published a paper on the inter-rater reliability, and it came out good. The ALP is really the only process-based measure that I was able to find. It's a good assessment tool. It really helps us to be able to identify the factors that are in play with these students and to give us some direction on what comes next. So here's a simplified table from the assessment. In this case, the student is at the second phase of the framework, Curious Novice, and they are demonstrating the attention and understanding of tool use factors. And as they go through and they continually engage in power mobility use, they have the potential then to be able to progress in these other skill areas. and they can get to the third stage of beginner. Again, it's a top-down approach to skill development. By using the Power Mobility tool, the student will be challenging their skills in all the other areas. In one of Nielsen's research articles, actually, just real quick, she went through and researched power mobility use in individuals with moderate to severe cognitive disabilities, and 8 out of 45 of these individuals were able to get to stage 6, which is the functional use of the chair. So I think it's a pretty big thing. You think maybe 8 out of 45 isn't a lot, but you look at the sample, these were individuals with some significant cognitive limitations. When you download the assessment, you're also going to have access to some intervention principles and guidance. 11 pages of a lot of ideas. And these ideas really come down to some different principles. One of them is that we are going to continually be empowering our students to be in control and to make decisions, and then to experience those natural consequences from their choices. Another principle is that we focus on client-centered teaching. We want to provide those meaningful experiences to our little ones, and then to embed it in individualized teaching. Third, we want to use lots of reinforcement to encourage participation. And then fourth, we're trying to create that just right challenge for our students to be successful. If those task demands are too difficult, we're going to frustrate them. We're going to create anxiety. If our tasks are too easy, then we're just inviting boredom and apathy. And again, when you download the assessment, you're going to have access to all these different principles that I'm sharing with you today. Okay, so we're going to quickly talk about our partnership that happened about a year ago. Right again. This is my, so for a couple of years and stuff, we were trying to, we got really excited about the Go Baby Go program. And in our district, we had some Hot Wheels show up that were adapted with some switches, and they were pretty cool. But they broke down real fast. We put them into our preschool classrooms. The kids hammered them. We took them to some of our kindergarten classrooms, and they just did not last. I spent one day fixing one of the power wheels and stuff, and it lasted like 20 minutes. And I said to myself, there's got to be an easier way to be able to do this. And so I interacted with Scotty on a couple of students, helping them out with wheelchairs, and heard what he was doing, and I knew that we had something really special. And so I invited Scotty out to Weber School District. We met with our team here. We have Doug Williams, Colby Wayment, Tana Field, of course Scotty, Courtney Hughes is in there, Sandria Wild, Janet Southwick, Lauren Enderly, and Jenna Favero. These are some of the team members in Weber District, not all of them, but many of the OTs and PTs, and perhaps you know some of them. So we got together, we started talking about what options we had out there, and we said, Scotty, we want one of these Go chairs that you've been talking about. We think this has some potential. So Scotty went back, to Shriners. We only had 4 weeks left in the school year, and he came back to Weber School District, brought us one of the Go chairs, and we started to try it out. We took it into our preschool, and we had 2 kids in particular that we wanted to try it out with. They both showed some immediate interest in it, and we thought, okay, these guys are somewhere along this framework of progression. And so we started off real fast with it at the end of the year, and the end of the year came. It was kind of a downer. Here's a picture of the Go chair. Basically it breaks down into 4 different parts.
Let's talk about the cost. Oh, I'm sorry. So this again is just a little bit of what this is exactly that we have. It's basically an adult base. If you look at all those colors, we take that off and then we build pediatric seating specific to the child. The one that we were providing for the Weber School District is that we wanted to be as flexible as we could. So we got an about size and whatnot. But again, when we were talking all about those barriers, some of those are broken down with this. It doesn't look like a traditional wheelchair, so maybe, it looks more like a toy. That's a very positive thing. It comes apart, so there's your transportability idea. That's a little bit. And again, I'm talking about those barriers in regards to looking at with families and whatnot. I think a lot of times we got to sell this to our parents a little bit. Once you get the child in it, then they go, okay? That's it coming apart, so you can see how it's transportable. That's Gary, an outstanding ATP that we stole from Norco, and now makes us look like a charm. And they oftentimes are building that seating, and we build that seating specific to the child that you refer in, and we will take your feedback. You're more than welcome to come through the door on how to build that and what seating you feel is appropriate for that child to be successful. All right. So that's just that. It's the sorry, it is a Go chair. So it's Pride. Through Pride, it's Pride Go chair. So if you look at that, yep.
Okay, go ahead. So basically, Scotty came back and provided it to us free of charge, right? He said, here you go. We're super grateful for it. What we've learned with this, so one of the first reality checks as we went into summer is we've got to maintain this battery. We didn't want the battery to just die on us over the summer, especially a new chair. And so we had to take it home during the summer and charge it every 2 weeks to make sure we keep the battery up and going, which was kind of a big thing for us. In September, we came back to school. We're ready to get back into the Go chair, but there's so many things that happened to be realistic. Lots of barriers, so we didn't really get it going during September, which was kind of a downer, but it's reality. In October, we started being able to coordinate our use among the other therapists and the classroom teachers, where we only have one chair among all of us. We're having to share it, and that's okay right now. We just have to be able to be clear when we're taking it so that others aren't expecting it. Transporting it is a reality. I know that for many of us, we are itinerant. We're going from school to school, and our cars are already chock full of different therapy equipment pieces, right? So, when you go to the grocery store and you have a Go chair that's broken apart in the back of your seat, it kind of aggravates. It's kind of aggravating, right? We've learned real quickly that one size does not fit all, and so we're having to do a lot of OTPT problem solving right there in the moment. For this student in particular, had a really hard time keeping his feet to the foot plate. And so I just grabbed the only thing I had was a gait belt right then and there and said, okay, let's wrangle those feet down to the foot plate. Another thing that has kind of stuck out to us is just the placement of the joystick off here to the side. That's a traditional place for a wheelchair, right? But I think for a lot of kids, as they're learning to use tools, that it makes more sense for some of the kids to have that joystick at midline with that. In November, we kept doing some training and whatnot. I followed those principles that were in the ALP, and just a lot of cause and effect for some of these kids. And so letting them know that their hand can actually create movement in the chair. And there's just a little bit of a stutter when you first start with it, which is kind of a barrier. So you kind of have to do some physical prompting to help the kids, but eventually they get it to go. Here's a good progression for being able to decrease my physical prompting. First, I was basically hand over hand with the student. I was able to work my way further away from the hand to the elbow. And by the end of the session, the student was being able to engage with the joystick a little bit. Now, I've had to go back and reduce some of this prompting on subsequent visits, but I can see that it's taking less time for the student to need all those cues. He's able to get back to a previously learned spot much quicker. Okay, so in summary, I think being able to collaborate with Shriners has been very beneficial. It's a lot more complex than just here's the chair, go with it. I've had to be able to problem solve with Scotty on a couple different things, and there's still things that we need to be able to figure out. But overall, I think it's a good opportunity for us to be able to use power mobility and not have to sit there and think, oh, do I go after and push for that power wheelchair? Do they have the skills for the power wheelchair? Again, it's a different way of reasoning within this framework. We're giving them access to mobility, knowing that they're going to develop in other areas. It's a fundamental difference. I did mention earlier that I went through and did my doctoral capstone on trying to figure out what it is that OT practitioners were doing in school-based practice. There's a lot of practitioners out there, and we're in different school districts, and every school district seems to be a little bit different. And so one of the things I wanted to find out from practitioners is, what is it that you are doing in your school-based practice? And so I asked practitioners, I said, are you working on power mobility? Are you working on transfers or functional mobility or ambulation? And only 44% of those who took my survey reported that they had worked on either ambulation, transfers, or power mobility at least one time over a 2-year period. So there's not a lot of OT practitioners out there who are addressing power or mobility in the most general senses. Then I also asked him, I said, outside of the school, like out in the parking lot or out in the community, are you working on mobility at all? And only 14% said that they had worked on that at least one time over a 2-year period. So not a lot of effort going into there. I always want to advocate for OT. I think there's a lot of things that we have to offer our students, especially as we work our way out of the boxes of just fine motor, sensory, and handwriting out there. In my research, I also wanted to find out what are some of the barriers that practitioners are facing in school-based practice, and make this very specific to Utah. And all the feedback I received was quite resounding into some specific themes, and those basically were around the first one, a belief that OT is fine motor, sensory, or handwriting. And that's a belief by practitioners, by administrators, by parents that continually gets reinforced over time, and it's really kind of hurting us from what we have the potential to do. The second thing is that OT practitioners in Utah schools, that we have too many students to deal with, to be very honest. We don't have enough time to be able to really broaden that scope right now. So that is something that holds us back. You know, we see it not only OT, but within our speech services, PT services, classrooms in general. When we have a lot of kids that we're trying to help with, we can't broaden out our services to do all those things that we want to do right now. And the third underlying barrier is that there's pressure from others to remediate deficits or fix students. So as we go through and do our interventions and stuff, we have parents, we have teachers, we have lots of people who are saying that, I want you to fix the kid. And we're trying to use those bottom-up approaches over and over again, which really kind of hurts us because there are so many ways that we can come from a top-down approach to be able to help people function. We can remediate, yes, but we can also adapt, and we can change things to improve participation, which is super helpful.
All right. Along with some of those barriers too, again, we're here in this community together, and we're all trying to do this to make it better. That's why we're here, and that's why you're at this conference as well. Let us help you too. In regards to, I know that you all are busy, and here at Shriners, we do know it's busy, and we know that the funding resources are difficult to sometimes maneuver. I never thought I'd say this in my career, but I'd be like, if you have a wheelchair need, bring them to Shriners, and I will do the paperwork. And we know how to maneuver through the different systems, and we do that in a very succinct way, just because we get to practice doing it. So I never said I would help you with that I would do your letters of medical necessity, but if it's a wheelchair, we're pretty good at that, Matt and myself, okay? So we would be willing to do that. However, we want you to participate and tell us why that child needs, so we can develop that letter. So we'd love to support you on that, some of those difficulties. If you assess and you feel that a child is reasonable for power mobility, come in and let's talk about it. Let's trial some things. We would love to have more opportunity. Well, here, we're going to go with where are we hoping to go with the future, and why are we here today? Let's go ahead. Advance. All right. So first of all, how young are we going to be able to go with power mobility, and what age should we be starting this? So I don't know yet. We do have lifetime mobility up at Shriners, and that's with the introduction of this baby bug, we call it. Okay, and you can kind of see some of those pieces, and that was what Ren was riding in, what you saw, that little video. And so we would love to, and I knew who I was talking to in regards to coming here with UCAT and whatnot, and I was like, hey, we might need some help with this, because we want to build a kit for this baby bug idea, okay? So that you can access it, and that we can find people to build them. I'd like to put them in early interventions, 0 to 3, and start looking at and have therapists use them and say, what is happening? What is happening when we introduce this in? So I think I know less than, now that we've started doing this, than more. So I'd like to have just access of that, okay? Infants with mobility impairments, to have access and exposure of self-initiated mobility therapist oversight. I'm here today too. We'll support you in regards to go-chairs and some of that power mobility, or even some mobility in a manual wheelchair. We haven't talked about that too, but sometimes kids, self-initiated movement over 10 feet is incredibly powerful too. We will help you with that as well. We haven't talked about manual wheelchairs, but again, you need to set those up correctly so that self-propulsion is efficient, very efficient, especially for kids who have never experienced it themselves, okay? And then finally, we got to start figuring out treatment plans. The ALP is outstanding. It's a beautiful tool that I've enjoyed, especially because we've always been looking at adult interventions and adult measures. That is finally started to look at a progression from 0 through, okay? From the beginning users. So that's what I'd hope that's what we're hoping to do together. Okay, go ahead next. We're definitely going to continue our partnership with Weber School District. I learned a lot. I'm like, Okay, what are the barriers? What are some of the hard things you have there? And we're starting to learn that. And we're like, what are some of the things that you're doing that are successful? A lot of times we were so busy up at Shriners, we were just putting out these products, but we weren't treating, which we should. We weren't, we follow up. We do follow up often. But again, we were putting them in without having maybe enough communication with the people that are actually using them besides the parents. We love that school environment. We love the natural environment that these kids are in. We want to continue that. Okay. I think we said that if you have a student that you feel would benefit from these, we're more than willing to help you, but with you part of the team. Okay. So if you communicate, if you can't make it into Shriners, that's fine. Emails work too. I've had long emails and we'll address it and then we'll be able to communicate that back and forth. Again, you're part of the team. And then GoChair in schools. The way that we got the one in Weber County, in Weber School District, is we just keep asking until they say no. So we were like, hey, can we put that one in there? And he said yes, and I didn't ask again, and then we got it there. So maybe we can start looking at our different resources throughout the state, maybe our different funding sources. These things are cheap relatively, okay? They're cheap relatively. $400, I think, for the little baby bug, the infant one. I think we can do the other one for about the GoChair. I think we probably can get it down to about $2,000, which is pretty good. That's pretty good in regards to things like that if we can do it for other things. And maybe when there's always grant monies, there's always those types of things we can find. So we're going to push the system a little bit. Let's keep on asking for maybe sometimes forgiveness, maybe sometimes permission. Okay. Go ahead. We'll advance that. All right. Where are we? Okay. Here's where Travis is at. Okay. If you have any questions in regards to his experiences through, and this presentation was posted for y'all. And so this information's in that. So this is where Travis is. The next slide is where I'm at. Okay. And then again, these are posted in there or whatnot. You can go ahead and call. Next slide. And then we have our references involved in there too. So anything that we kind of went through, if you want to refer to that, those are in there as well. Okay. We made it 5 minutes. Questions? Yes. I would love it. Yes, I'm sorry. Would we be willing to bring different sizes of power mobility to your location to have an idea so that we can look at transport, the positive and the negatives of things? Did I say that correctly? I think yes. I'm hesitant to answer. We're really busy right now, but that's another reason that we're doing that. I'd love to put maybe I shouldn't say it out loud. I'd love to put a little bit more pressure on Shriners because I feel we're a nice benefit and we'd like to support you more. We have a long waiting list right now, but I'd love to take time to do that because the reason we're here, I feel that we can support the state and that means supporting you all. And then you're giving us great feedback. I'd be more than willing to take that amount of time. I'll find it, of course. Yes. Where are you? I should ask that first. Oh, heck yeah. Oh, my gosh. Yes, you bet. And I would go far, too. When I was with children with special health care needs, we'd go throughout the state. And so it's never a problem. It's huge.
One thing that's awesome with Scotty, too, is he has time built into his weekly schedule to be able to engage in research and community type activities. So
Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Yep. Yep. Great. Right on. Yep. To be honest, where we're at right now is I need to speak with our lawyers at Shriners Hospital and just kind of say really what we had, the intellectual property. It's not great. Meaning these are very long story. Ken Kazol was an OT, was also an engineer. He's the one that started our program. He makes things it's not over-engineered. These are very simple products, and that's why I think the frustration is that they are easily accessible. So our goal was never to make money on these, it's more to make access. And so if we can do that, if we can partner, then we accomplished our goal. And so I think the goal used to be bigger, but I think the state of Utah is great. So maybe we can be, I'd like us to be an example. And actually, you bet, I worked with the state and I understand our resources. We need to use them. And there's monies out there available. So I'd love that partnership. You bet. We'll talk. We'll talk. Other questions, sir?
Good question. So the question is, yes, we've been able to use the Go Chair within our school district, and we have been working with a couple different kids. And to answer your question, yes, we are seeing progress. Yes, one of the barriers that you actually identified is just the amount of time that we have devoted to be able to do some of these things with our kids, right? Because a lot of the practitioners, we were trying to fulfill those, what I call essential job demands, like the things that we really have to do. We've got to be able to address that fine motor, sensory, and handwriting stuff. There's no doubt about that. Those are those basic needs. But yes, we want to be able to branch out and to be able to work on this power mobility and to help our students out, absolutely. And so the framework is especially helpful for us in being able to make those decisions quickly to figure out where the student is and what type of intervention am I going to use with a student, which takes out a lot of the guesswork. You know, we're not shooting from the hip. We're trying to be thoughtful and very intentional with our interventions with that. But yeah, being able to devote the time for this, that is a barrier, absolutely. In our district and stuff, we're trying to run the 3-in-1 model right now, where we follow our traditional schedules for 3 weeks, and then that 4th week of the month, we're trying to do some non-traditional things, which has been super helpful. So that's a good framework to be able to work from. But yeah, we're also trying to figure out right now, like, who is it that's working on the power mobility? Is it the preschool teacher? Is it the OT? Is it the PT? Is it the classroom aide? You know, a lot of these decisions are still being made right now as we go through this. But from my opinion, I think, you know, to be able to instruct in the power mobility and to follow those principles, that is a pretty high degree level of a lot of thought process that goes into it. So if I delegate the use of the power mobility device, I really am thinking, who am I delegating this to? Probably not a paraprofessional right now, but if it's an occupational therapy assistant, yeah, I can delegate there. I have that trust and that professional's ability to be able to use those principles to help the student. Good question. Yeah. Okay, good comment. So physical therapist from Alpine School District, she's able to delegate the use of the power mobility device in some tasks that are appropriate. Okay, any questions online out there, Jay, for us? Okay, I guess we did a great job. All right, thank you all for your time.